Konnichiwa Minna. Today I'm really excited to be reviewing one of the best animes of all time, Attack on Titan, to be specific, Season 4. The most anticipated anime of the previous season, Attack on Titan got the fans screaming, talk about its animation, talk about its story, talk about its characters. It was really very difficult for the fans to keep up with the heat and suspense after each episode. The final season part 1 was just something different, filled with thrill, amazement, suspense, emotion, distress and most importantly intense action. As the season's part 1 is over, I'm here to review the anime. It's gonna be my first ever anime review. I hope you guys like it. Before I start the video, I wanna make sure that it's all spoiler free, so let's begin. Attack on Titan has come out to be one of the greatest animes of all time since its release in 2013. Now we are in 2021 and the anime has changed its tracks. The final season premiered on December 2020. Since then it's been successful in amazing the viewers from its heart-throbbing amazing action, suspense, thrills and gore. Talking about its OP, it's a complete banger. It tells a lot about how the anime would be. The war atmosphere, guns, explosions, soldiers, titans all show us that the season is filled with warfare, bloodshed and destruction. The final season starts with the setting of warfare with the continuation of the war between Marley and Mid-East Alliance, cannons, guns, grenades, soldiers and titans. We get to see intense action only the first episode itself. The cruelty of war is depicted from the fearful faces of Eldian soldiers who are nothing but mere slaves to Marley. This time the season focuses on Marley's perspective of the people and their intense hatred for the people of Paradise, whom they call devils. Attack on Titan has taken its time to display both the perspective of the people of Paradise Island and the people of Marley. Who do you guys think it's at fault here? Which side are you on? We are introduced to many new characters and even titans. There are the warrior candidates to inherit the armored titan after Reiner. Of those, the two interesting characters are Gabi and Falco. They are the leading warrior candidates to inherit the armored titan and have got major roles to play in the anime, if you know what I mean. We are introduced to the Wallhammer Titan, which has the ability to create any structure by hardened Titan Flash, and a different looking Jaw Titan. We also see the Cart Titan, which can be fitted with different equipments to extend its usefulness. The best thing about Attack on Titan Season 4 that I believe is its storyline. Back in 2013, no one would have thought that the story would come down to this. Just amazing. We get to know both sides better, their obligations and the cause for their hostility towards each other. The final season has the kind of twists and turns that it really leaves the viewers in shock and excitement. The suspense is really hard to cope with. The intense action and the brutal scenes displayed is what the fans wanted, and Attack on Titan Season 4 has done its job. The battles are so intense and brutal that you wouldn't wanna blink your eyes for even a second. The ones who have watched the first part would know. And the way the story goes is really amazing. They did well in maintaining the pace of the story and showing every aspect clearly, and at last linking them all. Talking about its character development, Season 4 has been really impressive. We see huge development in the characters of Rainer Brown and the most controversial Eren Yeager. We get to see a very different side of Reiner, a more complex and puzzled one. Watching his past makes us understand him better. And talking about Eren Yeager, the character development he went through has been drastic. He is not the Eren we knew until the end of Season 3. The changes in his character has divided the fandom into two. Many fans consider him the best protagonist of all time and many hate him. Eren's character has been the most complex throughout the season. There's no telling what will he turn out to be towards the end of the story. There's been a lot of controversy regarding the animation of Season 4. MAPPA is the studio which replaced Wit Studio for the final season. Many fans are upset with the animation of the final season, but in my opinion the studio has done really well with the animation, and I don't think that the animation is bad. Of course people have different views, but I think MAPPA has done its job very well. At last, I don't have much to say about the ending theme song, but it kinda gives me sad vibes. The final season's part 2 is set to release in winter 2022 with episode 76, Judgment. If you guys haven't watched Season 4 part 1 yet, then what are you guys doing? You're missing some really awesome shit. I don't know why, but I think it's gonna be a heartbreaking ending. Well, it will only be revealed next year, but one thing is for certain, that the anime would not step back in amazing the viewers. Let's see what is waiting for us in part 2. Alright guys, I'm done with the review. Do tell me in the comment section if you guys liked it or not. It was my first ever anime review. I do hope I haven't disappointed you guys. Thanks for the watch. I'll be back soon. Sayonara.